a well-respected doctor, a terrifying figure lurking in London's shadows, a secret so shocking it could shatter the boundary between science and soul. What if the greatest evil isn't out there, but within you? Enter a chilling psychological mystery where every choice has consequences, and the line between good and evil blurs into something monstrous. This is not just a tale of horror, it's a haunting journey into the human psyche. Welcome to the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Before we begin, a quick message. Any digital copy of this content is piracy. Don't do it and stand against it. For new stories, subscribe to the Story Nexus at youtube.com passing to real Story Nexus. Don't go to fake Nexus. Want to know about upcoming stories? Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description.
The streets whisper. Secret's London slept beneath a heavy blanket of fog. The gas lamps flickered dimly through the mist, casting long dancing shadows against the brick walls and cobblestone paths. These shadows seemed to have minds of their own, stretching, shrinking, slipping through alleys like watchful phantoms. It was in this veil of gloom that secrets stirred. Mr. Gabriel John Utterson, a well-known lawyer in London, was a man not easily swayed by mystery. Cold, reserved, and somehow lovable. Despite his austere manner, he lived by principles and loyalties, especially toward his friends. Among those friends, none held a dearer place than Dr. Henry Jekyll, a brilliant scientist and respectable gentleman. On a typical Sunday walk with his distant relative and friend, Mr. Richard Enfield, Utterson encountered a story that would set into motion a series of deeply disturbing events. As they passed through a narrow by-street, a neglected row of houses, Enfield pointed to a battered windowless door and began his tale. A night of horror Enfield recalled a chilling incident. One night, as he strolled through the city in the Jekyll early hours, he saw a short, deformed man walking swiftly down the street. Suddenly, a little girl ran into his path. Without hesitation, the man trampled right over her, showing no remorse. The scene drew a crowd, furious and ready to call the police. To avoid scandal, the man agreed to pay the girl's family. But what shocked everyone was how he settled the matter. He vanished through that worn door and returned with a check signed by Dr. Henry Jekyll, a man of impeccable reputation. "I never saw a man I so disliked," Enfield said of the stranger. "Something displeasing, something downright detestable. The man's name?" Edward Hyde Utterson was visibly disturbed. He knew the name Hyde, and he knew something even more unsettling. Jekyll's will, which Utterson himself had drafted, left everything to Hyde in the event of Jekyll's death or disappearance. The will that haunts back in his quiet home. Utterson pulled out Jekyll's will once more. It had always troubled him. Why would a man as noble as Jekyll entrust all his property to a complete unknown? A man whose very presence chilled the soul. Utterson's suspicions grew. He resolved to meet Hyde and understand this strange connection. But how could he? Jekyll kept Hyde's details private. He didn't live in a known residence, nor did he socialize. And yet, fate made it simple. Face to face with evil Utterson began patrolling the street near the infamous door. Night after night, he lingered, and finally, his patience bore fruit. Spotted a figure, small, hunched, purposeful. Utterson stepped forward. Mr. Hyde, I believe." The man froze. Something about him, his eyes, his sneer, the way he moved, was unnatural, inhuman. Hyde confirmed his identity with curt words and vanished behind the door. Utterson was left in the fog, shaken. He had spoken to a man who radiated cruelty without ever lifting a finger. The haunted friend Utterson visited Jekyll soon after, hoping for clarity, but the doctor wasn't at home. Instead, he met Poole, Jekyll's butler. Utterson asked if Hyde had access to Jekyll's house. Poole confirmed reluctantly. "We all have orders to obey him." This disturbed Utterson even more. Jekyll, one of the most moral and refined men in London, had given this vile man unrestricted access to his home. He feared blackmail. Perhaps Hyde knew something dark about Jekyll. Perhaps he was coercing him, using secrets as weapons. But the truth was far more terrifying. The calm before the storm weeks passed. Hyde was seen rarely. Jekyll reappeared at social functions, cheerful and warm. Utterson's worry began to ease, but the unease never quite disappeared. Then came the murder. A respected gentleman, Sir Danvers Carew, was found beaten to death in the street. The weapon, a heavy walking stick. The suspect, Edward Hyde. The city reeled in horror, and just like that, Hyde was gone, vanished. No one knew where. The respectable Dr. Jekyll, meanwhile, locked himself away in his lab and refused to be seen. The city breathes. Uneasily London, though vast and bustling, felt stifled. The fog no longer drifted harmlessly through the streets. It clung, like dread on a soul. Word of Sir Danvers Carew's murder spread like wildfire. The police were baffled. The witness, a maid, described a horrifying scene. A gentleman politely approaching another, and then suddenly the attacker exploded in fury, clubbing him mercilessly until his bones shattered and his life ended. That attacker was none other than Edward Hyde. He had vanished, gone without a trace. A search of Hyde's rooms revealed little. A few pieces of cheap furniture, ashes of burned papers, a broken cane, the other half matching the murder weapon. Yet the man himself had melted into the fog, as if London had swallowed him whole. Dr. Jekyll's reappearance. To everyone's surprise, Dr. Jekyll emerged from seclusion. He looked pale, aged but grateful. He assured Utterson that Hyde was gone forever. "I am done with him in this world. It is all at an end," he promised. He handed over a letter, supposedly written by Hyde, claiming he had left voluntarily, never to return. Utterson believed him, or at least wanted to, but suspicions stirred like storm clouds. Why would a murderer leave such a tidy note? Why did no one witness Hyde's departure? And why had Jekyll hidden himself for so long? Things didn't add up. The letter and the handwriting. Utterson, ever methodical, took the letter to his trusted clerk, Mr. Guest, who had a skill for analysing handwriting. Guest made a stunning observation. The handwriting matched Dr. Jekyll's own, though slightly altered. The implication hit hard. Jekyll had written the letter himself. Was he covering for Hyde? Was Hyde a part of Jekyll's criminal circle? Or was it something deeper, something darker? Utterson couldn't bear to think ill of his old friend. So he filed away the truth, buried it under loyalty and fear. But the puzzle refused to be silenced. The House of Seclusion weeks passed. Jekyll hosted a few dinners, smiled weakly at old friends, and tried to resume life. But the calm was fleeting. Soon, he became a recluse once more. The windows of his home were shuttered. The servants whispered of strange noises, and orders shouted through closed doors. He was seen by no one, except through a crack in the laboratory door, and even then, only briefly. Utterson, now increasingly disturbed, visited more often, but was always turned away. His friend was slipping away again, as if haunted, as if possessed, and then Dr. Lanyon died, the death of a man of reason. Hasty Lanyon, one of Jekyll's oldest and closest friends, passed away suddenly and horribly. Only days before, he had been hale and skeptical, firm in his belief in science and logic. But something had changed him. Before his death, Lanyon had refused to speak of Jekyll, saying only, "I have had a shock, and I shall never recover." He left a sealed letter addressed to Utterson. On the envelope it said, "To be opened only if Henry Jekyll disappears or dies." Utterson locked it away, his heart heavy. He had now lost Lanyon and was losing Jekyll too, if not to death, then to something worse. Murmurs from within Jekyll's house groaned with mystery. From within came sounds, footsteps, whispers, sobs. Servants carried notes instead of speaking with their master. Poole, the butler, looked hollow-eyed and anxious. One day, he quietly told Utterson, "Master is changed. I don't think that's the man I knew inside that room." It was an eerie suggestion. What could he mean? Could it be Hyde? But Hyde was gone. Wasn't he? Terror in the lab. Then Jekyll vanished completely. Weeks went by. The doctor no longer appeared at his window, no longer responded to notes or knocks. Utterson tried everything. One night, he received a frantic visit from Poole. "Something is wrong, sir," the butler said, voice trembling. "I believe there's been foul play." Utterson's heart sank. He took his cane and followed Poole through the freezing mist to Jekyll's house. It was time to confront the truth. A house full of shadows. The night was sharp and unforgiving as Mr. Utterson followed Poole to Dr. Jekyll's residence. The butler's face, normally composed and dutiful, was now drawn tight with fear. Something had shifted within the house. A presence, a sound, a pattern of behavior that could no longer be explained or ignored. "Something's wrong, sir. That man in the cabinet, it is not my master." Utterson tried to remain calm, rational, but even he couldn't shake the icy weight in his chest. The silence within the house was not natural. It was tense, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The other servants, too, were unsettled. They gathered in corners, whispering of strange weeping, of urgent notes slid under doors, of a voice unlike Jekyll's barking instructions for unknown chemicals. A locked door, a voice behind it. A doctor no one had seen for days. Something had to be done. The final decision Poole described the voice in the cabinet. High-pitched, hurried, anxious. "I swear to you, sir, that's not the doctor's voice. I've known him for 20 years. This thing, it's something else." Utterson listened grimly. The mystery had gone beyond scandal, beyond shame. there could now be a body behind that door, or something worse. He demanded an axe, and together they approached the cabinet door. Breaking down, the barrier pool knocked one last time. "Sir, we beg of you to open the door." No response. Utterson gave the word. Poole raised the axe and struck the door with a violent crack. Wood splintered. The servants gasped. Another blow, and then another. The door gave way with a groan, revealing a dimly lit room choked with the scent of chemicals and the stale air of secrets. Inside, a body lay on the floor. But it wasn't Dr. Jekyll. It was Edward Hyde. He was dressed in Jekyll's clothes, but unmistakably Hyde. Smaller, twisted with that same hateful, unnatural expression. His face was frozen in a final grimace of defiance and despair. In his hand, a crushed vial. Poison suicide. Searching for Jekyll, but where was Jekyll? They searched the lab. The drawers were pulled open, full of chemical powders and notebooks. A mirror stood by the wall, large, cracked and smeared with fingerprints. A shallow basin held the remains of mixed potions. Everything suggested Jekyll had been here, and yet there was no sign of him, until they found the envelope. It was addressed to Utterson. Inside were 3 documents. A new will, leaving everything to Utterson. Hyde's name was gone. A note from Jekyll, dated the same day, urging Utterson to read the enclosed statement. A sealed confession. Utterson's hands trembled. He knew this was it. The final piece. The explanation he had feared, but needed. But before opening it, he locked the room behind him. Hyde was dead, but Jekyll's fate was still unknown. A city in shock news of Hyde's death spread quietly. The murder suspect, the shadowy figure haunting London's alleys, was gone. Utterson, ever discreet, gave no explanation. But the weight of the truth, whatever it might be, pressed down on him with every breath. He returned to his study. He locked the doors. He poured himself a glass of brandy. Then, slowly, he opened the envelope. A mind on the brink. After the horrifying revelations in the lab, Mr. Utterson returned home deeply disturbed. He barely slept. His thoughts churned like stormy waters, dragged down by the realization that Dr. Jekyll, a man of science, dignity, and decency, had unlocked something monstrous within himself. But the full picture was still incomplete. Jekyll had not been seen in weeks. His laboratory was sealed again. The servants, whispering among themselves, kept their distance from the building. Only Poole approached the threshold, slipping meals and written notes beneath the door, never once seeing the face of the man within. And yet they heard him, heard something. A voice that did not quite sound like Jekyll's. A sharpness in the tone, a panic in the words. Sometimes a weeping, sometimes rage, sometimes a chilling silence. Utterson feared the worst, that Edward Hyde had returned. But how the journals speak. As the days passed, Utterson, plagued by curiosity and fear, could no longer resist the lure of the documents he had taken from Jekyll's lab. He opened the pages again and began to read more carefully. The deeper he read, the more horrifying the truth became. Jekyll had discovered something no other scientist had dared to reach. A chemical formula that allowed him to unlock the darker side of his soul. With it, he could transform into a completely different man, Edward Hyde. Smaller in stature, younger, fiercer, and unburdened by the restraints of conscience or morality. At first, the transformation was intoxicating. Jekyll wrote of the liberation he felt when freed from the expectations of society and the shame of his own suppressed desires. Hyde was not just a mask. He was a manifestation of everything Jekyll kept hidden. But the power came with a cost: taste for cruelty. What began as experiments soon became addictions. Jekyll started transforming into Hyde more frequently, letting him wander the streets at night, indulging in pleasures and violence without guilt, and violence grew in him. Jekyll documented moments where Hyde would push strangers for no reason, laugh at suffering, even torture small animals. The animalistic nature of Hyde became more dominant, more impulsive. It was not enough to escape morality. Hyde began to enjoy its opposite. One night, without provocation, Hyde beat a man with a cane. That man was Sir Danvers Carew. That was the moment Jekyll knew he had gone too far. He vowed to destroy the formula and lock Hyde away forever. The illusion of control. For a few weeks, Jekyll returned to himself. He hosted guests, wrote medical essays, and re-engaged with society. But the temptation of Hyde still simmered beneath the surface. Jekyll likened it to a drunkard's longing for the bottle he has cast away. And then it happened. One morning, Jekyll woke up not in his bed, not with peace, but with horror. He was Hyde, and he had not taken the potion. The transformation had begun without his consent. His body, his face, his soul had chosen Hyde. The equilibrium had shattered. Panic consumed him. He scrambled to the lab, drank the potion, and returned to his form. But the message was clear. Hyde was winning. A prisoner in his own skin, Jekyll began to live in fear of himself. He locked himself inside the lab, desperate to avoid harming others. But even in seclusion, the beast inside stirred. The original formula was dwindling, and the key ingredient, one specific salt, no longer produced the same effect. The batch had been impure by accident. When Jekyll tried a fresh supply, the results failed. He was trapped. He knew then the transformation into Hyde was no longer a choice. It would soon become permanent. His last notes grew frantic. He could feel himself slipping away. "This is the end," he wrote. "I bring the life of that unhappy Henry Jekyll to an end." Hyde returns. In the final entries before the transformation overtook him, Jekyll described how Hyde had begun to take over, not only his body, but his mind. He could feel his own will weakening, his thoughts twisting, his compassion dying. He became cruel in moments where he once felt pity. He fantasized about running into crowds and wreaking havoc. And worse, he liked it. The line between Jekyll and Hyde had thinned to a thread. He was no longer two men in one body. He was one being at war with itself. And Hyde was winning. A city unaware. Outside, the people of London continued with their lives, unaware that behind the closed shutters of an elegant home, a man was engaged in a war against his own soul. They knew the name of Dr. Jekyll. They feared the name of Mr. Hyde. But no one, not even Utterson, understood the full, terrible truth. They were the same man, and soon only one would remain. Dr. Jekyll had vanished from society, not physically, but spiritually. Though his house still stood and his servants remained, no one had seen him for weeks. Strange noises came from the lab, and the once kind doctor had become a ghost in his own home. Poole, Jekyll's loyal servant, feared something terrible had happened. He heard weeping, whispers, and saw signs that someone other than Jekyll was behind the locked laboratory door. Utterson visited, only to hear a frantic voice pleading for mercy, a voice that sounded nothing like his friend. Inside the lab, everything pointed to one thing: Edward Hyde had returned. But how? Utterson turned to a sealed letter from Dr. Lanyon, written before his sudden death. It revealed the unthinkable. Lanyon had witnessed Hyde transform into Jekyll. After drinking a mysterious potion, the shock broke Lanyon's spirit and cost him his life. Jekyll's journal told the rest. The potion he once used to control his dual nature was failing. He began to transform into Hyde without drinking it. His darker self was growing stronger, and soon he feared Hyde would take over permanently. And that's what happened. Jekyll vanished, not killed, but consumed from within. London never saw Hyde again, because he never left. Jekyll was gone, and Hyde was all that remained. Now fully overtaken by Hyde, the man once known as Dr. Jekyll was trapped, body, mind, and soul. Isolated in his lab, Hyde lived like a hunted animal, paranoid, desperate, and afraid of capture. The authorities were closing in after the Carew murder, and Hyde could no longer go outside without risking arrest. Jekyll, buried deep inside, tried to fight back, but his will was too weak. His soul, once split, had been fully claimed by darkness. All that remained was Hyde, a man full of rage, now cornered and broken. With the last of the potion gone, and no way to return to Jekyll's form, Hyde realized the end was near. He could not face punishment. He could not live without his mask. So, he made his final decision. When Utterson and Poole finally broke down the lab door, they found Edward Hyde's body, lifeless on the floor, twisted and small. Dr. Jekyll was nowhere to be found. But the truth was clear. Jekyll had taken his own life by letting Hyde die. And in doing so, both man and monster perished together. After discovering Hyde's body, Mr. Utterson opened the final sealed letter left behind by Dr. Jekyll, a full written confession and explanation of everything that had happened. Jekyll detailed how, driven by curiosity and a desire to separate the good and evil within himself, he had created a potion that unleashed his darker self, Edward Hyde. At first, it felt like freedom. Hyde could act on dark impulses without ruining Jekyll's reputation. But over time, Hyde grew stronger, more violent, and harder to control. Jekyll tried to stop, but the transformations began happening without the potion. His darker side had taken on a life of its own. Jekyll lived in fear, guilt, and despair. His attempts to suppress Hyde failed. The potion no longer worked. He was trapped, his better nature fading, his soul crumbling. In the final pages of his letter, Jekyll admitted he no longer knew who he truly was. He ended the confession knowing that either Hyde would be captured and hanged, or he would have to die to free them both. In his confession, Dr. Jekyll delves deeper, not just into events, but into the philosophy and science behind his transformation. He explains how all humans are a mix of good and evil. His goal was noble at first, to separate these two selves, to free the good part from temptation. But when he created the potion, it released only the evil self, Hyde stripped of conscience, mercy, or restraint. Jekyll believed he could control Hyde, but he was wrong. The transformation gave Hyde physical form, but also power over Jekyll's mind. Evil was more instinctive, more liberated, and harder to contain. He admits that science alone cannot manage morality. His discovery crossed a line not meant to be crossed. What began as an experiment became a spiritual collapse. Jekyll saw the human soul not as a balanced whole, but as a battlefield, where surrendering to one side meant the death of the other.
Enjoying the story? Make sure to subscribe to the Story Nexus and hit the bell icon so you never miss an adventure.
As Dr. Jekyll's confession nears its end, his tone turns fatalistic. He knows the final transformation into Hyde is approaching, and this time there will be no going back. He writes of his body weakening, his mind fading. Each moment he remains, Jekyll is a battle against an overwhelming tide. Hyde no longer needs the potion. The transformations happen naturally, even without his will. The two identities are merging, and Hyde is winning. He prepares for the end. If he lets Hyde live, he will be hunted and punished. But if he dies now, he can take Hyde with him, saving the world from further harm. In his final words, Jekyll confesses not just regret, but terror. Terror at the monster he unleashed, and grief for the man he used to be. I bring the life of that unhappy Henry Jekyll to an end. He ends the letter, and in that same hour, his life ends too. The tale of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde ends not with a grand battle or a heroic act, but with a quiet tragedy. A man destroyed by the darkness within himself. Through Jekyll's experiment, we see a chilling truth. Every human being carries two selves, one moral, one monstrous. But Jekyll believed he could split them cleanly, control them. What he learned too late is that evil, once unchained, grows bold, wild, and hungry. Hyde wasn't a stranger. He was Jekyll, just without shame, without restraint, without soul. The story reminds us we can't run from the parts of ourselves we don't like. Suppression leads to imbalance, and indulging darkness leads to destruction. Science gave Jekyll power, but without wisdom, it cost him everything.
And that's the end of today's story. But don't go anywhere because many more thrilling tales are coming your way. At the Story Nexus, we bring you the most exciting, mysterious, and unforgettable stories from around the world. If you love adventures, mysteries, and timeless legends, then hit that subscribe button now. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Join our growing community of story lovers. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What story should we tell next? Want updates on upcoming stories? Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description. Thank you for watching and see you soon for another amazing adventure, only on the Story Nexus.